Have you ever been in a situation where everything just falls apart? A project, a relationship, maybe even a whole company. And it feels like it came out of nowhere. Well, today we're talking about a way of thinking that helps you see the warning signs way before things go critical. It's called structural thinking. And it's not just some new perspective, it's a discipline that can literally change how you see the world. Let's get right into it. I want you to think back to a time you were just completely blindsided by something. Maybe a project at work totally imploded, a friendship suddenly ended, or even some big world event just popped up and shocked everyone. Yeah, that feeling of surprise, of being caught off guard, that's what we're tackling. Because with structural thinking, you start to see the tiny cracks forming long before the dam ever breaks. Look, our brains are basically story-making machines. It's how we're wired. We see the world through this filter of emotions, memories, and narratives. But a structural thinker, they do something completely different. They hit pause on the story. They don't see a narrative, they see an architecture. They're looking at the forces in play, the load on the system, and how the pieces are actually holding together. It's a huge shift from just interpreting a story to analyzing a machine. So that brings us to our first big idea. And this is really important. Structural thinking isn't just another mental model you can add to your collection. Nope, it's a rigorous discipline. It's more like learning an entirely new language, one that completely rewires how you perceive reality itself. This quote just absolutely nails the core idea. Our default question is always, what do I think about this? Which puts all the focus on our own feelings and opinions. But the structural thinker asks, what is the system doing under load? That simple switch is a game changer. It yanks the focus out of our internal world and puts it on the external pressures that are actually shaping what's happening. You're looking at the architecture, not your reflection in it. All right, on to our second key idea. This move from your internal feelings to the external architecture means we have to start thinking like an architect, not a psychologist. And this is where things get really interesting, because the shift is total. You know, our go-to move is to play psychologist, right? We see someone do something, and immediately we're trying to guess their motivations, their intentions. We cook up a story to explain their behavior. But structural thinking goes way deeper. It looks at the invisible architecture that produces that behavior in the first place, the design of the system, where the pressure is, and how well it's all holding together. It's about understanding the how behind the what. And this completely changes the kind of questions you ask. Instead of asking, why did this happen, which usually just gets you a bunch of stories and justifications, a structural thinker asks, how did the architecture make this outcome almost inevitable? See the difference? Why looks for a story. How looks for a mechanism. And that's the crucial leap from judging a situation to actually understanding. So what does this mechanism actually look like? Well, let's just walk through it. It all starts with load, some kind of pressure on the system. That load causes the structure to bend or deform. That then tests its coherence, which is just its ability to hold itself together. If the load keeps increasing, the system gets closer and closer to a threshold, a breaking point. And only then, at the very end of this entire chain, do you finally see behavior. It shows you that behavior isn't the cause of anything, it's the final effect. So here's the bottom line. Behavior is just noise. The real information, the signal, is in the architecture. It's like trying to understand how a radio is built by only listening to the static. It's totally useless. For example, think about a team that's always missing its deadlines. The easy thing is to blame their behavior, but a structural thinker would look at the architecture of their workload. Are their communication channels a mess? Are they getting the resources they need? The behavior is just a symptom of a much deeper structural problem. Okay, so if we're supposed to ignore the noisy behavior, what's the signal we should be tuning into? Well, that brings us to the really hands-on part, the structural toolkit. These are the core concepts you can use to analyze pretty much any system, a person, a company, you name it. Let's dig in. First tool in the kit, load. This is basically any force, pressure, or demand that's coming into a system. For a business, it could be a new competitor. For a person, it could be a tough family situation. The key thing here is that tracking the load is everything, because while people can hide their behavior, you can't fake the load. The pressure tells the undeniable truth about what a system is really dealing with. Next up, we have coherence. This is all about a system's stability. How well is it holding together? Think of a well-built bridge in a storm. A coherent system can take a whole lot of load and not fall apart. So instead of asking if someone is, upset, which is super subjective, we can ask, how coherent is their internal architecture right now? It's a much more objective way to measure if a system can actually function. And finally, there's identity.
Now, this isn't what you probably think. We're not talking about self-image or personal stories. In structural terms, identity is the core shape, the one non-negotiable configuration that a system will do anything to protect in order to survive. It transforms identity from this fuzzy idea into a very real, observable mechanism. So, how do you actually put this all into practice? It's pretty simple. You start asking the right questions. What is the real load on my team right now? Where is all that pressure building up? How is our company's coherence, its ability to function, holding up under all this pressure? And what is that core identity that we are fighting tooth and nail to protect? This is your new checklist for seeing the invisible forces that are really running the show. And this is where it all pays off. When you start thinking this way, the world just stops being so surprising. You stop being a passive observer who's always reacting to things, and you become a proactive predictor who can actually see what's coming around the corner. Let's check this out in our fourth section. You know, when a system fails, a business goes under, a relationship ends, our natural reaction is to see it as this sudden, shocking catastrophe. It feels like a bolt of lightning from a clear blue sky. We call it unpredictable, mysterious, a total disaster. But a structural thinker sees a completely different movie. To them, it's not a sudden event at all. It's a slow, measurable, and predictable process. They can actually see the coherence decaying over time. They see the system getting closer and closer to its breaking point. For a structural thinker, collapse is never a surprise. It's just the logical conclusion of a process they've been watching all along. And because they can see the underlying mechanics, their whole approach to solving problems is different. Most people just offer advice, opinions, insights, suggestions. A structural thinker, on the other hand, gets into engineering. They don't just talk, they actively intervene. They work to redistribute the load, modify the actual structure, and stabilize the system's coherence. They don't just talk about the problem, they re-engineer the system that's causing it. So as we wrap things up here, it's so important to get that this isn't just about learning a new technique. It's about a complete and total rewiring of your perception. You'll start to see the invisible forces at play in every single situation, from a simple argument with a friend to a massive corporate merger. And maybe the most powerful aspect of all this is that it kind of removes blame from the equation. Instead of looking at people and seeing them as weak or lazy or irrational, you start to see systems under incredible load pushing up against their absolute limits. And that shift from moral judgment to clear-eyed analysis, well, that's a pretty profound form of compassion, isn't it? And this is the final crucial takeaway. Once you learn to see the invisible architecture that shapes our world, you can never go back. It's like putting on a new pair of glasses, and you can't take them off. You will forever see the hidden loads, the shifting coherence, and the thresholds getting closer. It's a permanent upgrade for your brain. So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. Take a real look at your own life, your work, your relationships, all of it. What are the invisible structures, the unseen loads and fault lines that are really shaping your world right now?